You know, I think the next time I'm having a bad day, I'm coming down to Houston, just hang out with you guys. This has been such an encouraging morning, just to hear it straight from those who are closest to the truth, and the importance of getting this message out. I was just reflecting, our son and daughter-in-law just bought their new home in Denver, and they're seeing these mortgage rates of 4%. And I told them, you'll tell your grandkids someday about that. But I compare that to where we were in 1981 when I was in Montana State University studying chemical engineering. My dad's in the construction industry at 21% interest rate, and it tied right back to what happened in 1973, the War of Yom Kippur. We stand with Israel, the oil embargo in '79, and the overthrow of Iran and the shock in the system here that launched truly a depression in this country. And the fact we've got that now, that air gap, because we are now independent, it cannot be overstated, truly. And so thank you for those presentations. I've got a question for maybe Dominic. Thinking about China, you mentioned there's going to be 2 billion more people on the planet by 2040. 60% of that growth is going to happen in Asia. You look at the world, you look at where the potential is. As you think long term, now this is 10 years after AOC says the world's going to end in 2030. So just for a moment, let's just pretend we get past 2030. Where do you see China in this overall play, and where are they going to get their energy?
Great question. You know, I mean, we've been at the leading edge of fracking technology for 10 years, and we've been ourselves, and we still are, trying to help, advance that around the world, in South America, in China, and the reality in India, actually, we've looked as well. And the reality is that we just seem to be inevitably coming up with very tough barriers in terms of getting shale to work onshore. Now, I think eventually it will, but it's just going to take a long time. And you cannot understate the advantages the US has in the way, and that Texas has in particular, I think as was mentioned, in terms of low barriers to access and encouraging entrepreneurship. So the reality, and the answer to your question is, in terms of new shale plays being developed, I think they will, but it's going to take a long time. And so the opportunity for the US is tremendous. I think where is China going to get its natural gas? Primarily Australia, as it does at the moment. But we have an incredible opportunity to send LNG a lot of it from the US. And so, I think the strategic opportunity to change the balance of trade with China is remarkable right now. So.
All right. Other questions for the speakers here? This is open to to anybody around the table here in the audience.
More coffee.
Go ahead, Pete. Yeah, repeat.
Question for y'all about Alaska, offshore Alaska. As y'all know, we're talking about offshore Alaska. We've been trying for about a decade to drill up there. There's a set season. It gets really nasty in the winter, but we know offshore, basically, at the Beaufort Sea, the Chotski Sea, there's a lot of oil. That's our oil. Also, expanding Anwar. We tried to do that in Congress, got that shot down. We know that it's just a postage stamp of the whole reserves up there that we're drilling on. Let's expand that. Build a natural gas pipeline, follow the Trans-Alaska pipeline. And this is my concern because, as Paul said, 100 Russian submarines, the Russians are very active in the Arctic Sea right now. They've got these icebreakers, these big ships. We have none of that. They're out there, they're being aggressive. That's our oil. We should get that stuff on market. So, Secretary Combs, any idea of DOI is doing, and also Conoco Phillips and Wayne, you want to comment as well?
So let me just say, from Intuitive's perspective, we are very actively working with Senator Murkowski, et cetera, up in Alaska. We would expect there to be a leasing opportunity in Anwar, probably October, November, December, something like that. There's a lot of work going on. And I don't know when the revenues won't flow in for a month or two after that, but that is what I was told yesterday, is that they're moving very expeditiously in the process. We've got to do the process, and then you've got to go and get your record decision. But I believe that, I think we'll be able to do that. With respect to the Beaufort and the Chukchi, they're obviously working on that for a long time. Lots of people are, lots of companies are. Alaska has, and its cities have, really unparalleled opportunities to also make sort of game-changing, contributions. I'll turn this over to Dominic to add comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we are the largest producer in Alaska, one of the impacts of the success of shale, of course, is it's very economic. It's very low cost, and so the offshore Alaska, we were pursuing that probably 10 years ago. We've had to put that on pause because it's just not competitive with what we're seeing elsewhere. Now, having said that, Alaska remains incredibly prospective. In fact, it's really going through a new era right now for us. We had a significant exploration program last winter. This is really heading not ANWR, but heading west in the NPRA. And we've got another 8 wells this year, and we're finding some very, very exciting potential out there. So Alaska is going to continue to play a very key role, eventually offshore, but it has to compete with the low-cost resources we're finding in the Lower 48. So.
Just about at the top of the hour here, we'll take a break, but as you look out to 2020, you see what you're hearing out of Washington, D.C. 2 different points of view. What concerns you the most in terms of what could happen in 2020? Because I think the politics here are very, very important, and just like your perspective from each one of you.
Yeah, where do you start? So, I think I think the thing, Senator, we're most concerned about, I kind of mentioned, which is a big pendulum swing, a big backlash. Regulation. Should there be an administration change? I mean, hopefully there won't. But whether that happens in 2020 or 2024, whenever it happens, we are concerned about backlash, and that is why we're very committed to work with regulators now to sort of maintain smart regulation. There has been some tremendous progress made in backing off overreach and so on, but our position would be not to go too far, but to try and maintain some smart regulation that can be sustained. That would be our key concern.
I would say when I went through the conservation numbers, I was making the point that we are aiming at a balanced approach to energy as well as conservation. We believe it is our job protecting the American people on the natural resources and the lands that they own. And we think that we have worked really hard with everybody, all stakeholders, and I expect that the next couple of years you'll see more. I think the thing we have not done is we have not convinced people of what's actually the story out there. I think we still have a terrible failure to communicate the incredible work that the United States industries have done about reducing emissions, about making sure that we're doing smart regulations, to Dominic's point, and of course from what Wayne is talking about, we really haven't told our story well enough. We talk to each other, which is lovely, but we don't talk enough outside.
Connecting the dots there too, as soon as you mentioned that in terms of the offshore revenues, if you realize those revenues have funded 70% of the fishing accesses in Montana. So
Right,
you think about, I'm an avid fly fisherman, a lot of folks come out to Montana, they film movies at the river, and so those fishing accesses were funded through the revenues coming off of offshore wind.
And that's a story not told enough.
Well, and those Montana beaches are beautiful. Your question, Steve, about 2020 and what could be coming. I want to make a point about the Green New Deal. It's easy to have a lot of fun at the expense of the Green New Deal. There have been a whole lot of jokes told. I'll confess I've told more than a few of them. Because it's a proposal that is, on its face, absurd. It's a proposal that calls for net zero carbon emissions in 10 years, which means effectively eliminating every gasoline engine on the face of the planet. Taking virtually every car and truck that is currently on the roads off the roads, eliminating the airplanes in the sky. By the way, I love the fact that the Hawaii senators support getting rid of airplanes. It's almost like nobody bought them a globe. I'm looking forward to seeing the train to get to Hawaii. Eliminating every boat, every ship, every jet ski, every lawnmower. Replacing every appliance in your house. The scoring and estimates of the cost of the Green New Deal over 10 years are $93 trillion. Now, government money, all numbers sound huge, but $93 trillion, to put that in perspective, that is more money than has been spent by the federal government in over 200 years of our nation's history. That works out to $65,000 per American family per year. That's what $93 trillion is. Not to mention, you know, the talking points they put out on it not only calls for the elimination of airplanes, it also calls for getting rid of the farting cows. Which I've actually joked to Republicans, this is a real opportunity. We need to make a play for the PETA endorsement and simply say, we're not going to murder the cows. We're going to leave the cows alone. You know, it's easy, though, to joke about this, but I want to give a word of caution. Things that you joke about have a way of moving the conversation. 5 years ago, nobody in this room would have believed that anyone would be talking about, for example, men using girls' bathrooms. That's now commonplace. Things can change fast, blazingly fast. And so the Green New Deal has the potential to go from a joke to an imminent threat in a staggeringly quick period of time. Now, this past week, the Senate took up and voted on the Green New Deal. And when we voted on the Green New Deal, out of 47 Democrats, the Green New Deal received exactly 0 yes votes. Every Republican, we all voted no, said no, this is a really dumb idea. 4 Democrats joined with us and voted no. And the remaining Democrats voted present. Truly a profile of courage. Ed Markey, who's the Senate author of the Green New Deal, voted present. And Senate Democrats were giving speeches, how terribly unfair to make us vote on the thing we say we support. By the way, let me just say, if anyone introduces any piece of legislation I've introduced and makes me vote on it, I'm a yes. Like, that should be one of the first steps when you're introducing legislation. Would you vote for it? If not, don't introduce the thing. It was important to get them all on record right now, but I also want to underscore, look, 2021, God forbid, we could have a President Bernie Sanders. We could have an Interior Secretary, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Look, I don't say that as a joke. And so I just want, our country right now is deeply, deeply divided. These issues matter and they're transformational and they have an enormous impact. And so everyone in this room cares about continuing to develop energy, to have an environment where there are jobs, where wages are going up. 2020, we are engaged in a fundamental debate about the direction of our country. In the 2020 Democratic primary, they're galloping to the left. They're actively embracing socialism. And so I just want to encourage everyone here, if we don't want to see an administration whose stated goal is to turn the country into a socialist country, then we need to engage and make the case on the merits. We need to move people's hearts and minds. We need to make the case the greatest enemy poverty has ever seen in the history of mankind is the American free enterprise system. Socialism is a disaster. It doesn't work. And stifling and destroying energy jobs is a recipe towards poverty and weakness And so I just want to underscore, it's easy to joke and feel complacent, but let me point politically to what happened in Texas in 2018. Because I actually think Texas in 2018 is foreshadowing of where the country, what the country is going to face in 2020. In 2018, in my Senate race, my opponent, Beto O'Rourke, raised over $80 million. He outraised us and outspent us 3-1. Now, what are the consequences of being outspent 3-1? My campaign had a total of 18 paid campaign staffers. O'Rourke's campaign had 805. We had 18 staffers up against 805. And if you look electorally what happened in Texas, the Democrats in Texas increased their turnout more than 100%. 4 years ago, the last off-cycle election, 1.8 million Democrats showed up in Texas. This last election, 4 million Democrats showed up in Texas. That's an increase of 2.2 million. Now, thankfully, from my perspective, we turned out 4.2 million Republicans. But that 0.2 was the entire margin of victory. I say all of this because if Green New Deal, you don't want to see move from being a punchline to the operating agenda of the federal government. This next election, the divisions we have, we're going to see, I believe, even greater turnout on the left in 2020. I think Texas, you're going to see Democrats spend more than $100 million in the state of Texas. In both the Senate race, trying to defeat my colleague John Cornyn, but also trying to win the presidential race. And so I just want to underscore these issues. Every one of us who cares about it, we've got to engage if we want to maintain the freedom to develop the resources and create the jobs. We've got to engage in the public arena and take on the other side, because the other side is getting more and more extreme and radical. And what may seem like a joke one day can become something acutely real the next.
Thank you, Ted.
I have one quick question.
Please.
I know it's less of a concern in Texas since there's not a ton of federal land here, but since we have President Macklin here, I was wondering if you could possibly touch on the decision by the Washington District Court judge that essentially put the 280 plus leases in Wyoming on hold. It's 300,000 acres. These are leases that have been approved by the Obama administration, and essentially his logic was it was a lawsuit brought by Wildlife Guardians against then Secretary Zeke at the time. And the judge put them on hold because he said, when they approved these leases, they didn't take into effect all these downstream impacts and emissions that, frankly, are outside of industry's control. And just wonder if you could talk about how dangerous that is, and maybe if there's a strategy for combating that. I know Wildlife Guardians, the Rock lawsuit, they have 80 lawyers filing these for this lawsuit, but it's a real threat to energy security.
It is, and we were impacted by that directly, actually. We have a small exploration program in Wyoming at the moment. So, it's just an example of where climate change, the climate change extreme agenda can sort of raise its head all over the place. And certainly in terms of the lawsuit itself, our industry will be working to work that directly, very vigorously. But I think this is why we support, when we think about climate policy, we've got some pretty key principles on that. That if you're going to have, rather than these little elements of climate policy that pop up and are very harmful to the economy, to states, if we're going to have climate policy, it should be economy-wide. It should be a federal. It should be a level playing field. It should be revenue neutral. And it should be, at the point of emission. So it's not just our industry that's getting affected. It's, it's a level playing field, and it should be really about, international. It should be bound by international treaties. This is a global issue. So these very select areas where this is probably very harmful and needs to be contested.
So
I want to add one point. One last point. Climate modeling drives everything else, and there is work underway that is very exciting about some documentation that climate modeling, when it is done, needs to be all 5 models. 8.6, 6.4, 4.6, 2. Whatever it is. When you project out, if you take the climate models for a 15-year period, all of the lines of impact are almost right on top of each other. They diverge widely at 15 years. We are taking a look at requiring a all modeling approach that you check your homework, you go out 5 years, you check forward again, you check backwards 5 years. It is, I think, going to add both transparency, accuracy, and predictability. And I think the science of climate modeling is actually improving a lot as long as you use all the models. If you use 8.6, you have the AOC end. If you use 2.4, that may be too low, but when you get all of them, you've got a whole new environment.
Thank you. Last word on, you said there was a judge that stopped what was going on here. I don't think it can be overstated, the importance of the courts in the next 6 years. The importance of electing a president who will appoint the right kind of judges and a U.S. Senate to get them through. In the next 6 years, by 2024, based on age of current judges in the circuit courts, it's most likely that every circuit court in America would have a majority of Republican-appointed judges by 2024, if you can hold it in the next 6 years. With an average age, Republican-appointed, of 55, Dem-appointed, 66 in 2024. This truly is a transformational moment in our nation's history. The stakes are very, very high. I'm one of those 2020 senators, by the way, up for re-election. Anyway, it's time for break, 10 minutes.